I've never been to Dublin. This is my first visit to Dublin. How am I supposed to come over here and pick out a few artists worldwide and let them do their stuff in Dublin?
At a very basic level, public art is the placing of artworks in the public domain.
If I work in the arts, I could only work in the public art sphere. I would never like or could work in a museum.
Okay, what I like about public art is the opportunity that it offers to artists to engage with place and also to engage with people. I also like that it offers the wider community the opportunity to engage with artworks, particularly people who might otherwise have difficulty crossing the threshold into an art gallery. The title ARC came from the Arc of the Wastewater Pipeline, and that cuts across a whole load of communities basically in Dublin, and quite diverse kinds of communities and places. So the pipeline then traces an arc from Finglas through Baldoyle Sutton and then out into the bay and around the bay, ending up in Ringsend. My involvement in the ARC project was as one of 3 curators, and our job as curators was to respond to this particular Percent for Art scheme and come up with a coherent rationale for the selection of public art projects for the ARC scheme.
So I think really the first thing to do is having a good debate among each other what we really want to do there. What the essentials of Dublin in relationship to public art projects are. Do we want artworks in public space? Do we want public space as art? Do we want artists to produce public spaces for people because they need it and the government doesn't provide it to them?
Not try and paraphrase your business, Kevin, but I wonder what you would...
I visited Amy last week as well,
And in our response to this, we thought that we would actually play with the kinds of issues that were raised, issues of ecology and environment, and also issues of community.
There are issues around that for people as to whether is that now functioning as a public art project?
Communities affected by the upgrading works, their relationship to their own place and their relationship to other communities, not necessarily adjacent to them, but nonetheless communities to whom there was quite a concrete thread.
Members of the working group from Dublin County Council, from Fingal County Council. I think there's been an awful lot of support from the non-art people involved.
We chose Amy Plant because of the nature of her practice, which is that she very specifically engages with community. And we wanted that one of the art projects to be an engagement with community, one that invited people to interact with the artist and with one another in a context in which they might not normally get to do so.
The Multistop Shop is it's a mobile shop which focuses only on what's produced locally, whereby anybody who lives and works in the county is able to stock the shop with things that they've been making.
We're still trying to get used to too. Let me give you a pen.
Pretty lovely, Matt, lovely.
No.
What was important for me from the beginning was to look at the idea of the shop. It is about the idea of the microeconomy, but it was also about how spaces like local shops and so on are actually quite social spaces.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Lovely to meet you.
The social part of it was very important.
Surprised. It's a bonus.
Just from being there a little bit and looking at how the area is changing in terms of people moving in, the area being developed, farmers selling land to property developers, it becoming much more of a kind of commuter belt situation because of its close proximity to the city. So in a way, the shop itself is a kind of research as well, because by inviting people to put things into this shop that they've produced locally, it's in a way, that is the mapping process for me, is that you suddenly then have this kind of three-dimensional map, if you like, of what's happening in the area. And the fact that it's mobile and it's travelling to different places means that it's instantly having a local audience. So it's a way of revealing to people what else is happening in their locality.
Make sure you video me, Jeep.
Look.
I mean, the caravan itself costs €650, you know, and then a whole process of renovation, which was quite exciting. And that process of renovation also meant that lots of local people got involved in it because I was employing local people to do the work. And that created a situation where people started to become much more familiar with the project through being directly involved, and word spread and so on.
Okay. I'm going to read you a poem for my mother, and the only regret I have is that I never read any poems to her, and now it doesn't matter because she wouldn't understand. She took an age to walk across West Street on a Saturday, stop and talk and start again, relaying the same particular story while we would hop from one foot through another.
These are nothing compared to the problems our parents faced in the 50s. Celtic tiger, my arse.
There wasn't much standing between the neighbours and us. In fact, it was about 1.5 inches of brick.
Pat basically saw a flyer somewhere, I'm not quite sure where he saw it, and he phoned me. He was really interested in creating some kind of anthology of local writers, of writers from Fingal. And he was in touch with various writers' groups in the area. So basically, I mean, he became what I would say more like a collaborator in a way, because he had a lot of suggestions about how to get people involved.
Thanks everybody for coming, for writing and for making it all possible. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
She's a believer, but I don't want to waste my time. Don't go see her.
And I remember driving around with Jenny when we were on a research visit back in February or something, and she was saying, you know, how are you going to get in with people, or how are you going to actually, you know, do something here? You know, it always, in the beginning, it always seems really impenetrable, but it's just a matter of going there and getting started, getting the ball rolling, basically.
Taking her too deep.
We recorded songs from the Blue Caravan in one day.
But that's okay. She can take with you.
I mean, it was lovely. I didn't really, you know, it wasn't, that was just a really easy process. I was amazed, actually. And it was amazing that day to see all these people turning up with guitars and, you know. And apparently all the musicians, they were really started to collaborate with one another. In a way, that was more than I could have hoped for with a project like this. Because you set out doing something like this and you're not entirely sure if it's going to work or not. My gut feeling was, yes, it will. But I had no idea exactly what direction it would go in, and that's the exciting thing about it, and that's very important. I didn't want to steer the direction of it too much.
Never get over.
write some comments?
Yeah.
Come on then.
Yeah, that's grand. Come on,
Come on, lads. Come in.
Lads, or no.
So, how do you think that Fingal can be improved?
Oh, it's a hole in the floor. New cinema.
We need a new cinema.
Get more new toilets in. A swimming pool, Joycey.
A gale fit.
Yeah, a gale. There'd be one in here.
Yeah, do you want to write some of those things down on the board?
More house, right?
Oh yeah, we don't want to pay for the bins.
Yeah, no bin tax.
I decided, well, okay, why don't we just make it into a kind of sounding board for the day for people to come along, and if they had anything they wanted to talk about, they could write on the walls and they could write things down. And also it was the time when the bin tax issue was happening, so we had 2 little bins for people to vote, one with yes and one with no, and people could write notes and then put them in the bins. And I think that was quite successful in a way. You know, a lot of people were saying things like, oh, you know, no, this is great because no one ever asks us what we think about anything. And I think it was nice to provide a platform in a way for that. The problem is that now I need to find some way of doing something with that material.
And into your right. Yes, we're on there,
So the media coverage was quite appropriate in a way. I was shocked by it though. I mean, I didn't expect there to be quite as much as there was. I didn't expect to be on television, and I didn't expect to be in the Irish Times magazine like that. You know, I wasn't really expecting that amount of coverage actually. So it did make me think, well, this is a really small country and if anything's happening, it's like, you know, that's kind of what I thought actually. To some extent, you know, there's a little blue caravan appears and it's like, wow, this is, you know, we've got to... No, I mean, not just that. I mean, it was good. And I think it was nice with the people who were involved. You know, there was always this question of what's going to happen with the caravan. And different things happened. I even had North Dublin County leader coming to me offering funding for the continuation of the project, but they would only fund capital and not salaries. And you know, because I did have it in my head that maybe somebody would like to carry it on as a shop that sold local products or whatever. I definitely wanted the caravan to stay in the county and be used in some way that was of benefit to the community. Adizola approached me initially because she had children's books that she wanted to get published. And then she told me about this information centre for immigrants that she was setting up. The way that that's come about, with Adizola using it for immigrants in the area, I think is fantastic, you know. If it can be used for that community, I think that's really positive thing, actually. Couldn't be better, actually.
She's a believer.
I think it's art. Of course it's art. You know, I mean, so if it isn't art, what is it? Who else could do that in their job?
It's birthday, really. We're doing this.
Pat, hello. How are you? You look a bit sad.
It's all over.
I know.
I haven't become famous yet.
You will. You will.
I still think it would have made a great chip fan.
I really do.
Amy's Multistop Shop traced a route through the community that allowed people who otherwise mightn't ever meet to encounter one another, either in person or through the kinds of ways in which the people had presented themselves within the caravan shop. People who were invited to use the caravan to sell items that they'd made, they were enabled to distribute their poetry, they were allowed to use the space for different purposes and therefore present themselves in a way to their neighbours, in a way that their neighbours that they otherwise might not be able to. And likewise to encounter their neighbours in a way that they otherwise might not get to. We chose Peter Fend because his work with Ocean Earth and his work in his own right address ecological and environmental concerns, generally at a global scale. And we thought, therefore, that his involvement in the project would be very interesting because the money for this project was generated by the upgrading of our wastewater facilities in Dublin, that his ecological concerns were wholly relevant in this context.
Dublin Bay is one of many bays around the country. It is the most populous bay by far. It is reasonable to say that there is an island with one major city, as Dublin, in which, and in that area, that Dublin Bay area, more than half the fuel is consumed, more than half the emissions and pollution is taking place, and the whole island should be seen as part of the overall drama of Dublin. So that if you were to clean Dublin Bay and make Dublin Bay be biologically stable, which is the objective of the waste treatment plant, you could also think about that occurring, if it doesn't already occur, in all the other bays around the country, like Bantry Bay, Galway Bay, Donegal Bay, and so on. The initial expectation was that we as Ocean Earth, that means myself, Eve Varelaus, and a few others that I've worked with, George Chaikin, Taro Suzuki, and then some scientists that Ocean Earth has worked with in the past, could produce some satellite imaging to identify what kind of goes on. There was a belief that because of what we know about Celtic religions and what we know about a little bit the Irish history, that there would be an interest in producing some kind of flame in the sea coming from the algae, this is certainly all over the coast, as a signal of the health of the sea. I mean, the reason for the waste treatment plant was to have a healthy ocean. It's not really about the city itself, it's really about the ocean, and the ocean immediately at hand. And a healthy ocean is an ocean that has healthy seaweed. So we thought that this would be an emblem, and also the idea of fire from the sea is for like the dragon in the sea that emits the fire, and there's various associations, kind of Celtic. We thought this would all be a strong image. I was invited here to collaborate with scientists and other people here in this country, and I have found that in Ireland more than, say, other places, you have, I guess because of certain historical traditions and maybe the university set up, I'm not sure, you have real priesthoods that run various, more or less state monopolies that are very resistant to inputs from artists, for example.
You know, the Liffey lets off huge floods every year on the Liffey. You know, the power station every day, and they throw the river into huge turbulence, destroying the ecosystem, and make the river dirty. If it was a smaller turbine running all the time, the ecosystem would not be disturbed.
You have a lot of knowledge, find a way to get that knowledge, combine with some capital, get the equipment you're talking about, demonstrate how it works, and sell it. But you know, Ireland, with its huge ocean resources, with its vast algae presence, with its quite wonderful countryside, could really look into ways of using biomass, I mean seaweeds, and of course wind and wave and other forms of renewable energy that are harmless to avoid the nuclear option. There are several things that emerged as realities. Reality first, there was no collaborative structure possible with any of the institutions that I approached. The fact is, if you work with scientists and you call yourself an artist, they don't want to work with you. They steer clear because they don't want to have their reputation tainted by the idea of it being art. If there was a public art project to do, say, a memorial to people who were slain in a major war, people would come together to try to make that happen. But if it's a public art project, it is to be a public art project, people tend to back off. Because the word art generally is a turnoff for most people. Scientists or engineers or professionals in major companies don't want to be especially associated with art. Well, what ended up having to be produced were posters promoting what we want to do, but we couldn't actually do any of the things we set out to do. And so we just simply, I mean, I'm not complaining per se, but we ended up producing advertisements. And these were public advertisements in the subway or in the Dart line, as well as some things on the street. Somebody from the Engineering Journal saw a poster and some staff of the Dart line, took it seriously, got in touch by email, and also proposed an article. Now that's exactly what we want to achieve. Namely, the people see it seriously for what it is, a proposal, for Ireland in this case. People see that there is some feasibility to be looked into here, and it's taken seriously by people who actually can do something about it. The function of the artist is to create the permission. If you think about all the great works of art that have had this scandal, then after that is okay. You know, after you have the Cubist thing, now it's okay to do Cubism. After you do abstract, it's okay to do abstract. After you do some algae making methane gas, now you can do that too. It becomes normal. So the idea is to just make, the artist is this avant-garde troublemaker who makes that which is not yet normal possible, permissible. And then the energy can focus on that. Most people think of me as someone who's going to eventually become more and more involved in politics and or industrial practice. And that makes sense to me because if you look at the history of artists, you'll see that, for example, the chief engineer, military engineer of France was a painter. And I don't think there's any reason why a person who is doing art should not be able to gain power. We already had Ronald Reagan, who was an actor. Anybody who's involved in imagery and iconography and communication and advertising and the way people psychologically respond to the world around them has fully the possibility of becoming a politician, perhaps even more than lawyers. We artists could do a better job of running the United States military than Donald Rumsfeld. And that's not because Donald Rumsfeld is stupid, that's another matter. It's because, as we see from history time and again, the more advanced thinking about technology, perception, organization, terrain, how to deal with material, is actually coming out of the artists. I do not give up, and for a host of reasons. I guess one of them is because I've already been doing this kind of work or pursuing this this avenue for about 25 years. So about doing this here in Ireland, I still think is possible because Ireland has these huge advantages over other countries in the world. It first of all has this whole, if you will, national mythology of being the land for some kind of vegetation and greenery and productive power. It has this certainly a very strong connection with the ocean. The population base is small. The area that you can work it in is very large, proportionately, and the need is growing. Because I'm in the art world, I have an international passport. I can go anywhere in the world and make money, and I can also correlate things, so that there will be international correlations made with what's happening here. If I go to England, I find out some things, I take this back to Ireland, and so on, and add more to the knowledge there, and then take it back to England, or take it on to another country. whatever we do here will of course have its feed off to other places, and also what we do in other places to find out will be fed back into here.
I think that Peter's project had moments when it was really very successful, and that those moments were when he was engaging with an audience or engaging with people around his ideas. Peter brings ideas from all sorts of different fields together and sets them in a particular context. And what he does is he invites people to think differently about their activity. So he engages with scientists, he engages with engineers, he engages with other artists, and invites them into conversations about how you might think about things differently. So the disruption of the conversations he brings with the whole wealth of ideas is the invitation to think differently about the problems that you're setting out to solve and how it is that you understand them and what kinds of answers are possible for you in your everyday context. We chose Gerard Byrne because of the nature of his practice. He works primarily with photography and occasionally with film, and what we wanted to do was to bring this very particular kind of practice into the arena of art and invite him to respond to a particular place. The work that would come out of this would invite people to see their place somewhat differently.
The reason why I'm interested in greenhouses is it's actually to do with the particularity of the region of Rush and North County Dublin. It's something that's unique to that region. So I was originally interested in the whole area, and I was interested in the sort of close relationship between domestic houses, greenhouses, beach, all sorts of different sort of elements that make up the topography of the area. I got more specifically interested in greenhouses when I tried to photograph in the area. There's somehow a connection between the glass architecture of greenhouses and the history of photography. There are inventions that roughly date from a similar period in the 19th century. But beyond that, the history of photography is bound up with glass on all sorts of levels, and it's also bound up with the idea of flat planes. So, you know, before there was film, there was glass plates. I think there's a very interesting correlation between the light space of a greenhouse and the dark space of a darkroom. One of the ideas that drives my interest in the glass houses from an architectural point of view is the fact that I have this idea that in a way they're the most crystalline, pure form of modernism in architecture in Ireland. And they're completely not recognised as such in terms of Irish architectural history. They tie in with the whole Mies van der Rohe aesthetic and with the sensibility in regards to the use of materials. The logic underpinning the glass houses is purely economic, and they're trying to do something within the Irish environment. They're trying to produce crops which don't naturally grow here. And I think all of those factors make for a very interesting and complex idea of these structures in architectural terms and in sociological terms. I'm interested in the relationship between this kind of factory farming of, producing hundreds of thousands of tomatoes, for example, or thousands of lettuce, and doing it all in this very mechanical way. That's something that interests me, and the notion that this stuff is very kind of, it's not organic, it doesn't have any of those sort of feel-good factors. It's very much kind of factory industrial production. And I'm interested in how they look when you see one next to another one, next to another one, next to another one. In a way, I'm interested in kind of the uniformity of them as a type of product, and that as a sort of outcome of the architecture of the greenhouses and the knowledge that's brought to bear on the production of tomatoes, for example, by the farmer. So in a strange kind of way, by photographing tomatoes or lettuce or begonias or whatever in greenhouses, there's a sense in which I'm interested in how the actual things you're photographing somehow manifest a whole load of other more complex set of issues. In my own particular way, I think I'm quite precise, quite anal, quite sort of controlling in relation to a project like this. I shoot everything, and then I do a lot of the darkroom work, a lot of the printing myself. It's quite labour intensive and very time consuming. I'm also a bit of a fetishist when it comes to making quite precise and very well-made photographs. I work with a 5.4 camera, which is very time-consuming relative to other types of other camera formats, and it's very precise. So it takes time. The vandalism was something that I hadn't really expected. I was pretty disappointed by it, actually. I don't know. I mean, I think that maybe I'm not cynical enough, but I was disappointed it happened, and I was also disappointed that nothing could be done about it. After the first poster was vandalised, after the first billboard was vandalised, we replaced it, and then soon after that it was the scheduled date to put up the second billboard. We put up the second billboard, and that was vandalised within a few days. And at that point, then we seemed to be at a loss as a group in terms of knowing where to go with it next. In the end, I'm making an archive of photographs which are going to be presented in a little museum display case, and that's in some ways the kind of heart of the project. I'm giving that to the county council. They're going to show that in the mobile library system in North County Dublin. And then we're producing a small publication which is going to be distributed freely around the neighbourhood and further afield. and that's a means of publicising the existence of this archive. In my research, I discovered that there is no visual record of these greenhouses, so that is where I decided to make an archive, which is a visual record of the greenhouses.
You know, they're beautiful photographs, and how he figures space is lovely. You know, it's really very interesting, and he has a really a strong interest in architecture, and this comes through because they're very there's a strong emphasis on structures and spaces within the photographs. They were destined to be presented on billboards. This would allow people to see places that they no longer see because they pass by them, to be reminded of their presence, and perhaps to notice something of their beauty in a way that they may or may not have noticed before. Finglas, in our experience in terms of meeting people in the community, was quite distinctive in that an awful lot of the open spaces within Finglas were experienced as really quite ambiguous because of a dual character, that at night they could become quite dangerous places. So we thought that an architectural intervention into that space would invite people to refigure their own place, to see their place differently, and also would perhaps change the relationship between their place and other places in the city, in that you would have people coming to Finglas who otherwise wouldn't, as well as inviting people in Finglas to perhaps see their own place in a more positive light. We selected Tatsuro Bashi specifically for Finglas, and because of the nature of his practice is about a very specific engagement with place and a refiguring of place.
Yeah.
Would you mind just kind of throwing it? 3, 2, 1. The view of Finglas up here is definitely the strongest selling point of this cafe in the sky. The only drawback is, if you're a smoker, you can't step outside to have a cigarette. Moonrider is open to the public from today until next Tuesday. Dimitri O'Donnell, TV3 News, Finglas in Dublin.
3 teas, no sugar. Latte, 1 sugar, and a large latte. Right, I'll just do that one.
It's absolutely brilliant. You should have come. I told you. It's brilliant. You wouldn't even think it was moving. It's gorgeous, and the sun is shining.
Moonlighter, das für Japaner ist ganz romantisch. Und ich wollte einen romantischen Namen. Von dieses Café von außen sieht vielleicht nicht so romantisch aus, mit Container und Bauplan. Aber im Café schon romantisch da. Tapete.
But is that cafe quite romantic? The wallpaper, it's nice.
On the outside, it just looks like a box, but when you're in, it looks really, really well. It's more than I expected, really.
It would be very interesting to know how the concept was developed, the whole idea.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know the way when you go to other cities, you can go to these revolving cafes, but it's a solid building. So, I mean, this is the same idea, I suppose, only it's just done a little differently.
Yeah. Keine eigentliche Dublin gar nicht. Und deswegen ich bin spazieren gegangen, 3 Tage durch Dublin. Es ist ja wahrscheinlich kalt, ne? Und Finglas hat mir eigentlich gefallen, obwohl die Image nicht so gut ist. Und wie ich gesagt habe, als ich hier spazieren gegangen bin, habe ich bemerkt, dass Finglas ganz wenig Kaffee hat. Deswegen Kaffee ist eigentlich ein gutes Thema. So.
The door to the kitchen would be like that as well?
No, that's the door going into the toilet. There's no door in the kitchen because the kitchen.
Those figures that I have are correct then. So therefore, that's the budget, and that's what we have.
Except for 1 week is going to be.
Well, we're providing that as of now because we don't have any more money. So.
But Jackie, this is an extraordinary project. I mean, it really is extraordinary at a national and international level. I mean, it's going to do your arts office.
Oh no, I'm well aware of how extraordinary it is, but that doesn't make money.
Just to go back to the money thing
Yes.
again, are we saying, well, I know there's only rough budgets, but that the rest of them are more or less on
Yes.
budget, and
Yeah.
that you might be talking about 30, 40,000 on this.
Yeah.
I mean, surely, Jack, we can convince the department.
How do you put a price on art?
So,
And it's
Somebody has to know.
Can I ask Tatsuro, you know, we can budget a week, but we have a problem with 2 weeks. What's Tatsuro's take on that?
Jenny möchte dich gerne fragen, es ist Ihnen möglich, dass Sie das Budget für eine Woche zusammenbringen, aber für 2 Wochen wäre es schwierig.
Ach so,
was ist deine Meinung dazu?
Also eine Woche oder 2 Wochen?
Ja.
Wenn kein Geld hätte, natürlich eine Woche ist schon okay, denke ich.
For Tatsuro it's not really a problem if there is not enough finances, 1 week would be perfectly alright.
The crane must be operated according to our manufacturer's handbook, and that as long as you do not overload the crane, you do what you like with it.
I think what we should do.
That's the simple answer you
I
get
mean,
from
Kieran is going to obviously give them a loading though, and they will have to
Yes.
come back and say, well, that is fine for that model of crane.
Yes.
I think that's what we should give them our detailed proposal of exactly what we're going to do with the crane, so that there's no misunderstanding.
Including the operation issues, rotating and everything like that. Sure.
And not just kind of a dead weight at the end of it.
Yes.
And the fact that there are people in it and all that kind of stuff, you know, and the safety factors that you would like to have built into that or whatever, you know.
Do I have it? Yeah, because I rang Chris and they said they were bringing it here yesterday. They would bring it here today. Yesterday? They said they brought it here yesterday. I think you can try and get it back. Okay, so put it on the front door then? Yeah. So I want to put all these signs up to get all the markers here.
Kunst ist eigentlich, nicht eigentlich, Kunst ist gar nicht nur für Kunstfreunde oder Sammler. Weil deswegen so, ich mag, Kunst ist für alle Leute. Weil das zu tun mit Imagination ist. Nicht nur für Geld oder sowas. Wahnsinn! Wow! Very nice, very happy! Wow! Die Leute, die normalerweise nicht so große Interesse für Kunst haben, gucken meine Arbeit und sie genießen, erfahren meine Arbeit.
It's going to be like this now all the time.
I know, it's a lot slower. It goes up slower and comes down slower as far as I know. Michael, they do it on the HSS.
Can you see the cemetery car from here? You can. I'm looking for my house.
And do you think it's art?
Definitely, yes. Because it took a lot of thought and a lot of organising and putting together. It's not something that somebody could just do. I definitely think there's a lot of planning went into it. It's great, yeah, brilliant.
I don't appreciate it as art itself, but I think it's a very worthwhile project. Yeah, it's good for the community because it's bringing something to the community, but it's also good for the community in the sense that outsiders not from the area are seeing it from a different point of view, and it's a reason for them to come to the area to have a look around, and you're seeing a bird's eye view. It is a lovely area. I didn't realise there were so many green areas and parks in Finglas, and it's only apparent once you're up here.
Und vielleicht es könnte sein, dass für ein paar Leute ist meine Arbeit nicht Kunst ist.
And it can be, or it might be that for some people it is no art, his project, the Moonrider.
Ja, und das ist eigentlich egal für mich.
But it doesn't matter to him.
Natürlich so, ich wollte etwas für Finglas, extra etwas machen.
But never have we had one that comes to
Konnichiwa. Sushi.
Just to congratulate Tatsuro, I'm delighted to meet him this morning. We had the pleasure of having a cup of coffee 30 metres in the sky. I don't really have a head for heights, but I have to say it's a fantastic project. It's a nice way to have a cup of coffee on a Wednesday morning, or a sandwich, whatever the case may be. But I'd just like to congratulate the artist, because I think we need to see more art around the city, and it's particularly great to see that we brought it to this part of the city in Finglas. Congratulations. Congratulations. Well done. Good project.
It's hot.
Very hot.
Very hot, yeah.
Very hot. But it's cold out. So
Most people expect to encounter art, whether in a gallery or not, as a kind of a serious affair. You know, you're expected to meet something and be invited to think about some serious issue. And Tatsuro is playful in relation to that. So you are experiencing art, but it doesn't have that seriousness that people expect of art. And it has an accessibility that people don't expect of art, because you're not being asked to figure this in relation to a broader tradition of sculpture. You're being asked to just go in and have a look.
To what extent does public art, and whether you take the projects in the art project, to what extent does public art work if people don't recognise it's public art, or don't recognise it's art?
Whether or not people realise that what they're looking at is art is not the only consideration. And if the project, say for example, if Amy's project managed to facilitate people making kinds of connections or strengthening connections within their community, if it manages to get information out there or prompts people to think about things in a different way, then whether or not they recognise that the spur to that thinking is art isn't really the most important thing. It's not, nor is it the most important objective of that particular artwork. If an artwork is posing a question, the most important thing about the artwork isn't that, oh, it's an artwork. It's actually the encounter with the question, and whether or not that...
that's why I find it very, very exciting. And the fact that the art establishment and the other funding authority actually are saying, we're making space for these sort of projects. It doesn't really matter if I think it's art. You know, the usual thing, you know, I could draw that, look at Picasso and say, I could do it, you know, or my child can do it. Rubbish, you know. That's not the issue. The issue is that there's a new type of engagement, which is exciting, and a new type of funding, which has enabled this thing, which is actually, but the tension is interesting, and it's, we can't just say, well, that's what artists do. I mean, artists do loads of things. We can't just be glib about it, that's what I'm saying.